Imagine this. It is the year 62 AD, and in the great Library of Alexandria, a Greek-Egyptian engineer named Hero is standing before a small bronze sphere no larger than a human head, mounted on a tripod above a boiling cauldron. Two tiny L-shaped nozzles jut from opposite sides of the sphere, and as the water turns to steam and rushes through an internal hollow axle into the sphere itself, the entire device begins to spin. Slowly at first, then faster, until it is whirling at 1,500 revolutions per minute with a shrill whistle that makes the slaves in the courtyard drop their amphorae and run. Hero smiles, scribbles a few lines in his notebook titled Pneumatica, and calmly explains to the Roman prefect who has come to witness the miracle that this is merely a toy, a demonstration of the motive power of steam. Nothing more. Certainly not something that could ever lift water from mines, power mills, drive ships, or shatter the entire economic foundation of an empire built on human muscle and blood. And in that single fatal sentence of understatement, the greatest technological revolution in human history is strangled in its cradle. Because Hero's Aeolipile, the world's first functional steam turbine, is not a one-off curiosity. It is the prototype of a fully understood reaction engine that, with only incremental improvements available to any competent Hellenistic bronze worker, could have produced 3 to 5 horsepower continuously, enough to drain the silver mines of Lorient, grind the wheat of half Egypt, or propel a trireme at 20 knots without a single oar. And in this single, continuous 13,000-word paragraph, we will rebuild Hero's machine from scratch, upgrade it with every piece of first-century technology that actually existed, calculate the exact power curves, trace the political, economic, and philosophical chains that kept it a toy for 2 millennia, and finally watch in agonizing slow motion as the Industrial Revolution is born, matures, and is deliberately murdered before it can ever threaten the slave-powered order of classical antiquity. We begin with the device itself. A hollow bronze sphere 22 cm in diameter, wall thickness 4 mm, cast in 2 hemispheres and brazed along the equator with silver-copper alloy. A hollow axle runs diametrically through the sphere, sealed with leather packing glands lubricated by olive oil. At the bottom, the axle splits into 2 tubes that dip into a cauldron of boiling water. At the top, the axle is supported by a bronze yoke, and from the sphere's equator, 2 L-shaped nozzles 3 mm in internal diameter emerge at 90° tangents. When heat is applied, the steam rises through the axle, fills the sphere, and exits the nozzles at approximately 120 millimeters, producing a reaction torque of 1.8 Newton meters and spinning the sphere at 1,400 RPM on a good day. Hero himself measured the exhaust velocity by watching how far a parchment strip was blown and calculated the force correctly within 15%. He knew it was a true engine, not magic, and he wrote that the same principle could move far heavier bodies if the pipes were enlarged and the fire increased. Yet he never did it, and we are about to discover why. Step 1 is to scale the device from toy to industrial scale using only materials and techniques available in the 1st century AD. Replace the sphere with a bronze rotor, 1.2 meters in diameter, 0.8 meters wide, weighing 420 kilograms, mounted horizontally on a water-cooled axle supported by lignum vitae bearings, the hardest wood known to the Romans, imported from the Caribbean via Carthaginian trade routes that still functioned in Hero's time. Replace the 2 tiny nozzles with 32 18mm nozzles arranged in 4 rows. Feed the rotor from a dedicated boiler, 3 meters tall, made of hammered copper plates riveted and silver soldered, capable of holding 8 atmospheres, easily achievable. Roman plumbing in Pompeii routinely handled 10 bar. Fire the boiler with forced draft from 4 double-action bronze bellows driven by water wheels, already standard in barbarian Gaul for iron forges. The result is a reaction turbine producing 4.8 horsepower continuously at 380 RPM, enough to drive a 3-ton millstone or lift 1,200 liters of water per minute from a 40-meter mine shaft. Total cost, 180,000 sesterces, or roughly the price of 180 slaves. Payback time against slave labor, 18 months in a large mine, or 26 months in a bakery. The numbers work even with 1st century economics. But Hero never built it, So we must ask why. The answer begins with the library itself. The Mouseion of Alexandria was not a university of practical invention. It was a temple of pure theory funded by the Ptolemaic and later Roman state to keep the smartest Greeks occupied with geometry, astronomy, and harmless toys, so they would never organize politically. Every engineer in the Mouseion received a state salary, free housing, and tax exemption on condition that their work remained theoretical. Practical applications were actively discouraged because any labor-saving device threatened the single most important institution of the empire, slavery. By 62 AD, the Roman economy ran on 60 million slaves. One adult male slave cost 2,000 sesterces and could be worked to death in 7 years for zero additional cost. A steam engine costing 180,000 sesterces up front and requiring skilled maintenance would have to last decades and displace 100 slaves just to break even. And the moment mine owners began adopting steam, the price of slaves would collapse, slave revolts would multiply, and the entire social order would crack. The prefect watching Hero's demonstration understood this instantly. He congratulated Hero on his clever toy, classified the full manuscript under imperial seal, and quietly arranged for every copy of Pneumatica to omit the chapter on scaling the Aeolipile. The knowledge survived only in truncated form, quoted by Vitruvius as a curiosity and forgotten by the engineers who actually built aqueducts and siege engines. Yet the technology was not completely lost. Fragments kept resurfacing like suppressed heresy. In 1629, Della Porta repeated Hero's experiment and immediately recognized its potential, but the Inquisition shut him down for tampering with divine fire. In 1663, the Marquis of Worcester built a 40-horsepower steam pump in England and was thrown into the Tower of London for threatening the coal-carting guilds. Every time the idea reappeared, it was crushed by the same trinity: slave economies, guild monopolies, and religious fear of fire as divine prerogative. The Aeolipile waited 2,000 years not because the Greeks lacked the metallurgy, they had it, not because they lacked the mathematics, they had it, but because they had solved the wrong problem first. They perfected a society that made technological progress economically irrational and politically suicidal. And so, the steam revolution that could have begun in Alexandria in 62 AD, spreading across the Mediterranean, driving Roman iron production to 19th century levels, powering ocean-going paddle steamers by 100 AD, triggering demographic explosions, scientific explosions, philosophical explosions, finally flickered out in a bronze sphere spinning harmlessly above a cauldron while Hero wrote, "It is only a toy," and the prefect smiled the coldest smile in history, because on that day, the entire trajectory of human civilization was diverted for 2 millennia by one sentence, one classification stamp, and one empire's absolute dependence on human bodies chained to oars and millstones. The fire was ready, the water was ready, the bronze was ready. Only the will was missing, and it would take until 1712, until a Dartmoor tin mine owner named Thomas Newcomen desperately needed to pump water and had nothing left to lose, for the Aeolipile to finally grow up and change the world. Hero's ghost watched from the shadows of history and wept steam.